Hi, welcome back. This is part 2 of my Israel trip. I'm Jim and I'm the current CEO of Royal Crown Foundation. Well, let's see, where did I leave off? I think I left off in Egypt. Now, the other cool things about Egypt, there were just too many to list. But let's move on. We'll go through the Sinai Desert and everything else here. Right now, I'm just going to stop where we kind of left off in Israel and then or Egypt, and then go on into Israel's story, okay? The last day we went to the museum that I was talking about earlier. We got up the next morning and we headed across the country, and basically we started to go across the Suez Canal. And to cross the Suez Canal, there's different ways to cross it, but we had, our tour guide decided to go a different route because we were going to try to see the Reed Sea. Yes, the Reed Sea, not the Red Sea. A lot of people misunderstand that the Reed Sea was actually the Red Sea. They dropped an E and accidentally it's now called the Red Sea. But it was named by the reeds that was alongside the side of the sea there. Now our guide, and I don't believe, I don't know if you believe this or not, but you can, have to be open-minded with a lot of stuff that I'm going to be telling you, okay? Because there's so much to cover. The story that he was telling us that there was a woman pharaoh who she was the one that he believed that Moses had been picked up by. Now she's the only pharaoh that was a woman, and she's the only one that basically had access to adopt a Hebrew or Jewish child at the time. So this is where he believes that Moses was picked up in by, I think her name was Hittitas or something like that. Anyway, the Reed Sea is basically along the African coast, and it goes up, and there's a Suez Canal that goes right down. They'd cut it to be able to bring in ships and stuff like that. The Israelis and the Egyptians built this way back when to be able to get into the Red Sea and have ports within in the Red Sea. The cool thing was that we went where nobody goes, and so a lot of our trip was dealing with going places nobody else goes. So with that, we went across at a place where there was a lot of armed guards and a lot of military presence, and they were looking at us like this big old tour bus, and even our tour guide that was from Egypt was kind of shocked that we had even got to go across there. Here we are, all Americans, and we're just kind of going to wherever our guide has kind of focused us. Well, anyway, we make it across there, and it's 100 miles to the middle of nowhere in an oasis. We have to have armed guards because out in the middle of the Sinai Peninsula there is no protection really from any enemy forces that want to kind of attack any tours or any people that are Americans. So we had basically about 15 armed personnel, 2 trucks, one in front of us, one behind us, that went the whole 100 miles to this oasis where we had a little stop, and then we continued on. We got to the border of Egypt and Israel, and basically we had to get off the bus, take all of our belongings and lug it across the borders, which was kind of a trying time because it was late at night, about 8:30 at night, and we were all hungry because it was time to eat. By this time we finally got to our hotel about 10 o'clock, and the Shabbat was going, and so there was a lot of kids and everybody just having a ball. In fact, I was just surprised that there was this many people even awake at that time of hour. They did open up the restaurant, and we did get to eat, and so that was kind of cool. But the difference between Israel and Egypt was there was a lot of difference. One was that I noticed that there was a lot more people that seemed a lot more friendly and a lot more open. They weren't as scared or uptight or any of that. In fact, after we got done eating, we decided we were going to go venture out and go put our feet in the Red Sea. And the Red Sea was just awesome, glistening that night. It was really beautiful. It was the 3rd of July, and we had just arrived, and all these people were on the beaches. Now, they don't normally go swimming on this spot, and I thought that was kind of strange. I'd see all these people around the pool. In fact, all these people along the shore of the Red Sea, and none of them were swimming. And I was thinking, you know, what's going on? How come they're not swimming? And even the next day, they were still not swimming. So I just took it that they don't swim on the Shabbat. Well, anyway, long story short, it was a great night, and we slept there, and it was very peaceful. Next morning was 4th of July. We got up early and headed up to Mount Kurkum. Mount Kurkum was in a military zone, so the only time that we could go was the 4th of July. The Israel government will do exercises all the time except for on certain holidays and on Shabbats. So this was cool because we got to get up and we got to go where nobody usually gets to go. And that's why we had to get to Israel and get, you know, going. Elite was the place that we were at, and the Coral Sea is right there, and it is awesome, awesome, awesome pretty. But we went to Mount Kurkum, which was the base of where he believes out of the 5 different, you know, now again, you have to take this for what it's worth. He believed there was 5 exoduses. This one exodus that's in the Bible is all a combination of 5 different stories. Now, I don't know if you believe that or not, but this is what he believes. Now, I was kind of curious because I did not heard this before, and so I wanted to kind of find out more and what this guy knows. Anyway, we got to the base of Mount Kurkum with the help of some military guards that would escort us into this military area, along with the Egyptian and Israel border, so that's why they had to kind of keep an eye on us. Here's this tour bus out in the middle of nowhere again. And, you know, like most people on tours, they go places where everybody else is going. But this tour was totally different in that we were going nowhere near where the tours were going. So here we are out in the middle of Mount Kurkum, which is kind of like looking at a desert, if you were to imagine a desert. But we went up to the base of this mountain, and I was thinking, this doesn't even look like a mountain. Of course, I'm from Washington, and our mountains are huge, so you know you can get an idea that that is not, you know, that great of a mountain. Anyway, so the story goes that we went, and the tour guide, he's basically a historian. Actually, he's one of the top most foremost historians in Israel history, along with a PhD in history, along with lots of other accreditations. I won't go into too many details with him, but his name is Moshe. Now Moshe had showed us this altar, which, you know, wasn't no bigger than probably 20 feet in circumference. Now we think a lot of times when we go and look at these big, you know, monuments and stuff like this, that wow, you know, these altars and these things must be huge. But he basically showed us that, you know, hey, back then these were just ordinary people, and they didn't, you know, carry these huge stones. They just carried, you know, probably the size of, you know, probably a couple 100 pounds, you know, 150 pounds of stone to make the altar, 12 stones that actually served as the altar, and then other stones that would represent where they would, you know, basically lay and burn the altar, or burn the offering. Anyway, the long story short, we climbed this 2-hour hike up to the top of this beautiful mountain. I will call it a mountain, but it was not really a mountain, but we climbed it in probably about 100-degree weather, so it was pretty hot. Everybody was sweating. There wasn't no trees, no nothing. And you can look at my pictures, and you can get an idea of what I'm talking about. In this whole area, there was like 140,000 pictographs, or I guess writings on walls and stuff in caves that we didn't get to go to see, or other things that he was going to show us, but we ran out of time because it was a 3-hour ride up and a 3-hour ride back, and then a 2-hour hike up and an hour hike down. So we just didn't have enough time for all that. Although what we did was we stopped along and he'd tell us the story of Moses and what went on there and what he believed went on there. Now this is where he believed that the Ten Commandments were written. In fact, this is the oldest known pictograph of, and I'll have to put that on my pictures so you can see it, but the oldest known Ten Commandments, which is 2 up, 6 in the middle, and then 2 on the bottom. And those represented, and I won't go into detail, but the different commandments of God. The Ten Commandments as you know them. Okay, okay, I'll tell you a little bit. The 2 in the first part is to dealing with God himself. Man dealing with God. Then the 6 were man dealing with man. Okay, and then the last 2 was man dealing with God. So you got God dealing with man and man dealing with God in the last 2. So these are all the Ten Commandments and what they represent and the way it was pictographed and stuff like that. And so that's kind of cool. The other things that we got to see was a few caves we saw at a distance. Me and Rochelle were like, we want to go down there and explore, but we just didn't get time to do that. So we got back home to our hotel. I'll just, go back to Elite where we stayed the night. The next morning we got up and we had a day off because it was Sunday and it was our day of rest. So we went and basically me and Joanne and a few others went over to the Coral Sea Observatory, which I thought, I wanted to go into the aquarium and check that out, but I also wanted to go for a swim along the coral beach. And so unfortunately I misunderstood what he said because I thought we were going to be able to do both. But meanwhile, we did go up to the observatory, and I have some video on my Facebook so you can see that. But anyway, the coral reef swim would have been really nice to go snorkeling along that, the pretty fish that were in there. But this is known for its beautiful water and the coral and all these different fish that go along there. So now we are in Elite, and we decide we're going to go out that day. We're going to go up to where Jethro basically lived, and one of the things about Jethro and Abraham and all these is what Moshe was telling us is that where you find one, you have to find the others. So this is where, like Mount Carmel, how come Mount Carmel was the mountain where, that God spoke to Moses, and how come Jethro, in this spot, how come Moses in this spot? Because what he did and what he does is take the Bible literally and he examines where all these different prophets and where these people were is where you will find evidence for all the different people that were Abraham, Jethro, Sarah, Laban, the whole 9 yards when you deal with that. So Jethro's area that we went up to, there was a sphinx along with a altar. Now this altar was a sun altar which Jethro and their whole clan would worship in the sense of the sun god. And so they had these different altars that were built. Now these weren't, godly altars. These were altars of pagan and Egyptian descent. So Abraham, though, was not into that thing. But we wanted to get evidence and to see where, again, like in Egypt, it wasn't so much that there was evidence of Moses and that, but it was the evidence that what was false, okay? You want to know what was false so that you can then know what was true. Just like a counterfeit, dollar bill, you want to know what's real. And so like at banks, so what they'll do is they'll test you out and keep, working with real dollars. And then when you feel a phony one, then you know how it operates. Okay, so anyway, along with this, we decided we were going up to the Dead Sea route. Okay, so we go up, and first stop is Tamra. Tamra was a little town, a watering hole, and the last stop where Moses would stop and camp. And we saw there was another altar. It was a little smaller and a little temple. These were not very big altars and big temples because, again, when we think of these huge altars and huge things, that's usually indication that it's not of God. I mean basically that one of the things that we were looking at in different things in connotation to the Bible was that God is in the small things, not necessarily the big things. Mustard seed, the pearl of great price, a drop of blood that covered a multitude of sin. Here, this great big universe and this great big God, and yet He dwells in our little, our heart, and He knows every hair on our head. So God is into the little details, not the big ones. And so even with the idols and things like this, they weren't these huge idols. They were just little bitty things in ivory or whatever. Because you got to remember, these guys were traveling. They weren't like, rich in the sense of having gold and frankincense and all this stuff. And in fact, you look throughout the Bible, the only ones that had that stuff are the kings and the queens. And these are the ones that had all the money and the gold and the treasures. But here, these little Israelis or Egyptians, when Jews took, or the Hebrews took out of Egypt, they did take the gold and those type of things. But they melted it down and they built an altar, golden calf and so forth. Now, you might think it was probably a huge golden calf, but I'm guessing it was probably a small golden calf. I don't think it was like this huge thing like, again, everybody portrays in the movies. The importance is the understanding that, again, that these were simple people and they didn't have, these huge ovens and all this stuff to do all this stuff. So they basically had to use what they had available. Okay, so back into Tamra. We went from Tamra up to the Dead Sea, where we found that, or actually this Sodom and Gomorrah area, where he believed Sodom and Gomorrah was at. This was a cool place because we had another opportunity to see, along with Tamra. Nobody visited Tamra, and it was like a watering hole, like I said. But when we stopped, it was like this, right off the highway, but it was like we were the only tour company, tour bus, for miles and miles around. So again, this is strange that we were in Israel in a tourist country and nobody knows about these locations. So we get to the outskirts of the Dead Sea, and this is where he told us the story of where Lot had gone up to the mountains, and he showed us the mountains where Lot actually found proof that Lot and his family lived up there, and they believe it's a cave that he actually was in. But it's called the King's Highway, along with other things. Now, again, you have to have proof not only of Lot, but the whole Sodom and Gomorrah, story. Ammon and Abraham and Moses and the whole, they have to be seen in all these different locations in order to prove that this is the location. It's not just by one person saying, look, here's the cave, this is where Lot was. No, there was a lot more evidence that points to it, and then you have to, use, what do they call it, your reasoning. Okay, so this is going to end part 2, and then I'm going to go on to part 3. Again, I'm going to try to be brief because there is so much revelation. The best thing I could say about the revelation of what I first felt about Israel is that the Spirit of God was definitely there. There was such a peace, but there was this like feeling of oppression against my spirit, in the sense that I could not, pray in the gifts or to express myself, in a way that I normally do in America. And that's the only thing I could say, other than there was totally peace. And I was just totally at peace with God there. So thank you for watching again, and God bless you until the next time, which is part 3. God bless. Bye-bye.